some help planning your shade garden? Coming up next, we'll talk about some of the great shade perennials that work here in Alberta. Hi, I'm Heidi with Broadmeadow Farm, and a couple weeks ago we talked about some of the great full sun perennials that work in your Zone 3 Alberta garden. But today I want to cover a little bit more about some shade perennials, especially because not everybody has that full sun. Shade perennials fill in that much needed space on the north side and the east side of your garden where a lot of your bright and sunny perennials just don't work. One of the things you want to consider when choosing a perennial is checking the tag when you're at the garden center, seeing what it says. You want to choose a perennial that says full shade or part shade. The reason being is that the intense sun of our late morning and afternoon is just too hot for those tender leaves. If you look at a shade perennial, often the leaves are quite tender. They're very soft, they break easy, and that's because they are built for the shade. So my number one favorite perennial is hosta for the shade, and that is because it comes in so many different colors and shapes. It can come from a quite petite one and it can go quite large. So definitely a hosta is one that you should consider for your perennial garden. The next one you need to consider is ferns. Ferns come in all different shapes and sizes. The one that you might know the most is probably the ostrich fern. So consider that one because it again will give you some great height in the back of your perennial border. It will fill in nicely and just give you some texture as well. Next perennial that works really well in your shade garden are bleeding heart. There's two types. There is your standard bleeding heart, which is one that will get probably 2.5, maybe 3 feet tall, and it's the one that most people are familiar with. It's that true pink heart with a little teardrop of white at the bottom. It does come in either white or pink, and this one it's beautiful. It will work for sure in full shade as well as part shade. And the next bleeding heart is the fern leaf bleeding heart, and this one's not quite as common for those in the garden. It is definitely a more petite plant, and its leaves are a bit more lacy, but it is definitely one that I would consider putting in your shade garden. Covers are really popular in the garden for shade because they will fill in the spaces that some of the shade perennials can't do. A lot of times, some of the shade perennials are a little bit more petite, except for the hostas we talked about. So ground covers are really nice. First up is Lamium. It is a lower silvery gray and green creeping perennial that has little pink flowers. The next is Creeping Jenny. You'll find that one in your garden center, sometimes in the actual hanging basket section, but there are a perennial variety. So just again, check your tag, see what the zone is. The next one is Snow on the Mountain. That one is one that you need to be careful because it creeps at an aggressive rate. It's also called goutweed, and this is one that I really hesitate to give you, I guess, permission to use in your garden. It definitely has its place, but it takes over. It will creep past your border edge. It can creep into your lawn. The beautiful thing about it is it does fill in immense areas. So if you have an area that's not really suitable for anything else and it's struggling to grow other things, this is one that you could put into your garden and you can just fill in huge areas. It's really nice, kind of in a large landscape, more of a acreage setting, because if you have it in your town lot, it will take over your small beds very quickly. A couple other shade perennials that are really neat to consider in your garden are one, Shooting Star and Snowdrop Anemone. Both of these will also work really well in a rock garden setting because they are a bit of on the shorter side. Where the Snowdrop Anemone will spread, it has a bit of a spreading habit. The Shooting Star is a much more petite one. But again, these are kind of unique ones to put in your shade because they're really kind of cool. So there are a couple more perennials that you want to consider for your shade garden. One is an Stilby. It has a bit of an airier flower head. And if you've seen spirea, which is a shrub, it has a similar airiness to its flower head, but it can come in shades of pinks and whites. And it's kind of a nice one to put in your garden because you can get a bit of color in the shade. A lot of times you'll notice that most shade perennials are all about greens and textures. So if you can find that perennial that gives you that little pop of color, that's beautiful. And that's again why I like the bleeding heart. The last two perennials you should think about adding into your garden are Solomon's Seal and Lily of the Valley. Two beautiful plants that are going to give you a little bit of height and color and a little bit of scent in the garden as well. First off, I want to say a great big thank you to all those people who have subscribed over the last 10 weeks. We reached 100 subscribers and that's super exciting, and it's because of you guys that that's happened. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Please keep it up. It helps people find my videos. Next week we'll take a little peek back in the vegetable garden and we'll see what's growing a little bit bigger. We'll see if the peas are ready. We'll check if the beans have started to form, and we will just give you a little update next week. Thanks for coming and stopping by today. Happy gardening.